Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's UCLA Alumni Town Hall, an update on student life at UCLA, hosted by UCLA Alumni Board of Directors, Samantha D'Souza. My name is Joseph Blancas, and I serve as an Associate Director at the UCLA Alumni Association. The UCLA Alumni Town Hall series is a gathering place where Bruins can have their voices heard, ask essential questions, and receive transparency and expertise. Today's program will highlight the work being done in student affairs and across the various associated departments and gain insight into the programs, services, and resources available to students. I want to take this opportunity to thank our Alumni Association sustaining donors. It's with your help that we are able to strengthen the Bruin community with programs like this. For some general webinar housekeeping, we'll have time at the end of our program for a Q&A with our panelists. So please email your questions to the email provided in the chat. We will also be recording the event and we'll share it out once it's available. Now, to start our program, I'm excited to introduce our moderator for today, Samantha D'Souza. Samantha is a creative strategist and producer, currently focused on expanding the global portfolio of Act 3, an international brand activation factory. Samantha, thank you for being here and for moderating today's conversation. I would also like to welcome our panelists to the screen: Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, Monroe Gordon, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Campus Life, Mick DeLuca, and Assistant Vice Chancellor of Student Development and Health, Dr. Suzanne Seplow. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. We're excited to have you. And Samantha, I'll turn it over to you to start our program.
Great. Thank you, Joseph, and welcome to our wonderful panelists and everybody tuning in. This is a particularly special panel for me to moderate as a student. I was able to interact and see the wonderful work that all three of you do across campus, and it definitely impacted my life on a personal note. But it's extra special because you are also three people who have seen the university through some incredible shifts and changes, talking about the last few years, but many years before that. And it's a really nice time to reflect on that sort of broader picture and understand the state of student affairs and the broader experience of students on campus and staff on campus at the moment. So really excited to speak with you all today and get a few questions from our audience as well. I wanted to kick off with the question, sort of diving straight into the specific student affairs department. So Monroe, pointing at you first, maybe you can give everyone a bit more insight into the vast network of what student affairs kind of does and set that foundation for us so we can dive into a bit more of how things are going at the moment post-COVID and what it means for students coming back into the fold after this time away from campus.
Of course. So let me just say, first of all, Sam, thank you so much for moderating this panel. And I want to say thank you to AVC SINA for inviting me and my colleagues to be a part of it as well, and Joseph for his work here. So, yeah, I mean, that's a huge question that you asked, right, in terms of students coming back. I mean, one thing I would say is that for many people who don't know, student affairs really is a very large area at UCLA. We work very collaboratively and very closely with our academic affair colleagues, and a lot of the work we do, people might want to characterize as out of the classroom, but I really think it's more just complementary to the overall development of the students, whether they're in or out of the classroom. Some of the areas that obviously come under student affairs are Res Life and the Career Center and in our CAPS area and in our ASH Center. So those are some of the areas that people know a lot more about. But we also work very, very closely with all the student organizations on campus. We work very closely on first generation type issues for our students at UCLA. And we also have the Center for Accessible Education and some other areas. So I mentioned that just because, to your question of sort of how are things going for students, there's so many touch points that we have in student affairs. They're really intended to provide the necessary support for students, regardless of where they're navigating on campus, but then also to give us a good sense of where we might need to bolster some of our services. Lastly, I would just say, how are students doing as they come back? I mean, obviously we're still within a pandemic, I think, but certainly coming back to campus more and more. We did see a number of just really challenging and terrible kinds of data coming out of the pandemic in terms of students feeling a lot less connected and going through a lot more mental health challenges. And so I think students are cautiously optimistic, but then also are hurting a little bit as they come back, right? And it really becomes the goal of the campus to try to provide those kinds of just-in-time services to help the students.
Definitely. And you know, that kind of leads me into a question for both you and Mick, and then eventually Suzanne, and the work that you're doing in student development and health. But Mick, specifically riffing off what Monroe just said, you know, obviously creating and recreating and establishing that connection and community building, we kind of have to reimagine the way we do that now versus how we did it before COVID. What's your perspective from a campus life standpoint on how we've been able to take that forward, and what feedback are you getting in your department from campus life?
Yeah, thanks so much, Sam. And as indicated, truly honored to be here, and appreciate the opportunity for questions and engagement. A lot to reflect on, as the Vice Chancellor indicated. You know, we're in week 3 of spring quarter, and I think it's hitting us a lot, the reality that a direct entry student to UCLA graduating this year, we sent home their spring quarter, their first year. They were fully remote their second year. Their third year, we had a number of COVID and cautious protocols. And so really, this is the year of experiencing UCLA. I think for all of us, a lot of engagement. There are activities going on, but I think, at least in the way I look at the world, you know, the one thing the pandemic did is it severed the relationship and leadership pipeline. And so seeing that build back up, you know, we're barely meeting students who are highly engaged in something, and then they're graduating in 7 weeks. Where in a normal continuum, much like you, Sam, we might have known you throughout your journey of UCLA. And yeah, I think in the world I have, and I just had a couple meetings with different students doing spring quarter events. And, you know, it just hits you that I'm in charge of the event. I've never attended it, and I've never run an event like this, but I'm in charge of it this year. So the line we use for ourselves and in dealing with students is, you know, they don't know what they don't know. And, you know, so it's kind of slowly rebuilding all of that in this, you know, community of engagement on campus.
Completely understand. And I think the flip side of that as well that's really interesting is also the staff in your departments and the teams that you guys work with have also had to go through a new kind of way of engaging with students on campus. Can you give us a little bit, Monroe and Mick, a bit of an insight as to how that process has been for staff to adjust to reestablish those connections so that we can better support those students who are hurting as they come back?
Yeah, I think we have, you know, we're not unlike all other industries, right? And so I think we have dealt with issues of the Great Resignation. We've dealt with needs to be more creative and more thoughtful about how we're engaging staff, and, you know, how staff are allowed to have certain kinds of work environments, right? And that includes hybrid environment. I think one of the challenges that we see within student affairs is that so many of our areas are areas that directly work with students. And so in some instances where you have other parts of the institution that can be more remote in how they go about doing their work, we don't have that same opportunity in a lot of the different places we have in student affairs. So, you know, I would say, Sam, the first thing that we needed to do was to ensure that staff understood how much we valued them, because our staff have been really, many of our staff were around even throughout the main part of the pandemic, actually on campus, and even during times before we even had a vaccine. And so making sure staff recognize just how much we value them, and then providing opportunities for staff to be able to learn more about the student populations that we have on campus. You know, I tell people the greatest thing about UCLA is the diversity. And the most challenging thing about UCLA is the diversity. And with the diversity, what that really requires in so many ways is for us to think about very customized types of approaches that we are providing for our students, so that students don't feel as though they're just a number or they're just a part of a large group. And so those customized type of approaches, though, require us to have staff engaging in training that allows them to better understand the needs of our students. So I think that we are in a good place. I mean, we clearly continue to work hard to bring more and more staff into the organization that can work with our students. But I would also just like to say that I've never worked in an organization that has had more dedicated individuals to the work that we do than Student Affairs. And I feel just really honored to be a part of the Student Affairs organization.
And that's an incredible segue into a bit of the meat I want to dive into with Suzanne, because your department with student development and health, Suzanne, has been so crucial to creating these opportunities, programs, services to help students, discover a new pathway forward when they maybe thought that they couldn't really investigate exactly what that looked like, given there was so much uncertainty during this time. So, I turning it over to you, can you tell us a little bit, a two-part question. Number one, why is this department so crucial within the scope of UCLA's community? And how are you guys approaching that process that Monroe just talked about of, they didn't know what they didn't know, and now we have to create that visibility and opportunity for students and staff to connect and for the students to really see these futures for themselves?
Excellent. Well, let me add my thanks for having me here with my colleagues, Samantha, and our friends and alumni, and all the folks that have joined in. So it's a honor and pleasure to be here, and would be happy to talk a little bit about kind of student development and health, and appreciate kind of one of our priorities is championing kind of the well-being of all our Bruins, and in that is really it's critical because we do see our students continue to look at their overall well-being, and certainly we've all have seen the reports about college students and their mental health, and that is a component of their well-being. But it really does tie into so many other aspects, in terms of UCLA continues to be an incredibly rigorous institution academically, not only just to get here, but to continue your throughput here. And so between the academic rigor, the pace of the quarters, and just the everyday struggles that we see from our students, really trying to bring in wraparound services for them through student development and health. And so, two highlights that I guess I would share in terms of just why it's important and crucial is that, we want to give our students, the tools and resources to support them when they need them, and that at any given time, our students all have their own journeys, and some need support in different ways at different times through that journey. And so really trying to set up kind of a spectrum of services where students can tap into what they need at the right time. And so a couple of things that we've created in the last several years, this was right before the pandemic, but we created a unit called RISE, Resilience in Your Student Experience. And this is really to provide kind of the wraparound mental health support that's outside of a treatment or clinical nature. And we have found students truly gravitate to our RISE Center to get that wraparound support and, to kind of give and put their own oxygen mask on first and get that real care and well-being for who they are. The other piece, one of the other departments in student development and health is residential life. And while not everybody lives on campus, we continue to offer more and more university housing to our students, both undergrad and graduate students. And, our slogan is "You belong here." And I will say that for those of us that have been doing this work a little bit of time, we recall that even back in the day, it was about, those that study student development was really about folks feeling like they matter and understanding one's identity and feeling like they belong. And those things remain true today as they did, many things have changed, but that sense of feeling like you belong, feeling like you matter, and that there's a place for you cannot be minimized, and how that really impacts a student's journey is critical. And so we spend a lot of time, whether that is in the different areas that Mick is responsible for, of really that student engagement, student involvement, or whether that is whether that's in terms of how you enter into campus and where you're living and how you feel a sense of community. So those are some of the areas that we focus on to go to what you were talking about and what Vice Chancellor Gordon was sharing as it relates to what we've done and how we continue to really try to get our students feeling from day one, regardless of when and where they're entering the university, that they belong, that they matter, and that they are a valued and rich part of this diverse community. Let me pause there.
No, I mean, there's so much to dig into there, Suzanne, and I think we could talk for hours about what each of you are doing in your departments. And obviously there are so many synergies between the work that you all do. I'm sure you guys are connecting on a daily basis, about how to make sure that the teams working in each of these great initiatives are aligned and we can provide that best support. And, for me, it's particularly special to hear you dive into these newer initiatives, because for me as a student, I graduated 5 years ago. Walking through campus and finding my place of belonging was absolutely life-changing. I lived, I was an international student who lived far away from home. And even before COVID, mental health and the conversation of your well-being and future was so profoundly important to my experience walking up Bruin Walk every day. So it's incredibly commendable to see that not only are you all still fostering that continued growth of those spaces, but the intentionality with which you're seeing the way, the pandemic has changed how students are getting themselves into those spaces of belonging and adapting for that is really beautiful to hear about, and I'm sure appreciated by those listening today. And in that kind of frame, Mick and Suzanne, I would love to hear a bit more about the new Basic Needs Center that's opened in the Strathmore building. So for those listening, this is a center that provides access to students for food security programs, financial literacy workshops, emergency funds, and a general rest space. So I would love to hear from all of you a little bit more about how you're each involved in the space and what led to this expansion, and any updates that you might have to share with the community who knows or doesn't know about what's going on.
You want to start, Mick, or you want me to start? Maybe I'll start this, and then what I will do is I'll turn it over to Mick and Suzanne. And I'll just say real quickly that UCLA has been, I think, at the forefront of what we're now calling basic needs, but it was a litany of other types of insecurities that we have seen across our student spectrum and student population, and whether it's food insecurity or housing insecurity, which may have been the sort of initial iterations of as we think about basic needs. UCLA has long been at the forefront. Food insecurity, we have our community programs office that has really provided, I think, just incredible food services for our students, including a food pantry and other types of food giveaways for students and staff on campus. And then, excuse me, as we think about the work of our economic crisis response team that provides funding for students in crisis, and even the work of the various staff within different departments that refer students when they have housing needs and other types of needs. So we've just been, I think, in a really good space. One thing, Sam, we've needed has been more accessible space because we are sort of situated all around campus, and sometimes it's more accessible than not for students. What we were seeing is that there was a need for us to get into the quadrant of campus that is a little bit further south, if you will, on the campus, that also aligned more appropriately for many of our graduate students and our postdocs. So that's where the initiation of this new center started. We have a terrific benefactor and donor that came in and really believes wholeheartedly in the work that we're doing and provided a very generous donation for us to be able to start this. And we've been able to do a lot more of the having intentionality around financial literacy and financial wellness. What I've said in the past is I've had conversations about this, is that we're trying to take students from aspects of dependence to more self-sufficiency. So moving students along the spectrum that allows them, after they're provided with this support and this care, to then end up being mentors for other students who may find themselves in positions of needing the same kind of support. In addition to the center, sort of more generally, we've also established a location for a new Bruin hub. And so with that, I'm going to turn that over to AVC DeLuca, because his team has been instrumental in bringing the Bruin Hub area to UCLA.
Yeah, thanks, Monroe. And let me just echo what the Vice Chancellor said. I've been here a long time. This is my 34th year working at UCLA. And in this conversation, I'd like to frame that, in my heart, I believe we've always been in the business of meeting the needs of students or trying to find innovative ways to support things as issues or concerns come up. But as the Vice Chancellor said, we've really been on the cutting edge. It was 14 years ago opening the first food closet on a college campus as referenced, and establishing this economic crisis response team, knowing that there was gaps that could create barriers. And I think, as the Vice Chancellor indicated, now being able to create this umbrella that connects and ties existing ongoing good work and connects a number of the initiatives on campus. The words I use are kind of healthy, active, inclusive, and sustainable, which, aren't basic needs, just student needs and human needs. And then how do we best connect those direct things, as the Vice Chancellor mentioned? It could be food-based programs or emergency housing needs, or this concept of creating financial literacy or creating access to finances when there's emergency kinds of needs. But it also umbrellas a number of other initiatives we've connected, creating community gardens on campus, converting and having a little Bruin clubhouse for parenting students, converting and creating a teaching kitchen that could tie food insecurity with the ability to create some skills. And then, as Monroe mentioned, creating this concept called the Bruin Hub, which is really converting a squash court in the Wooden Center to a place that now has some innovative units for rest, studying quietly, bringing a variety of resources, a great partnership with the Design and Architecture and City Lab at UCLA and their research arm, in designing these places where any Bruin, but it's identified, commuter students, a place to anchor and have home, store stuff, access to food. We put it in the Wooden Center because we'll soon get back to 24 hours a day access. With access control in a safe environment, the ability to have a locker, take a shower, maybe do something active in between classes, but also have a rest place. And as the Vice Chancellor was able to acquire some resources, and we gained some space, primarily as a result of a different work environment at UCLA. So some release space in the Strathmore building. We're able to expand these services, and as mentioned, a second Bruin Hub has gone into that location. So I think this concept of meeting the needs of people and students where they're at, trying to take advantage of the resources we have and being able to scale them, and then use the concept of the Bruin Hub in spots where somebody could convert an old meeting room, or you can think differently about repurposing space to better meet the needs of today's students in the campus life that they live.
Thank you so much. I mean, there is some really incredible work, and optimizing these spaces to support that student network is ever important. And before we move on to the next element, Suzanne, I wanted to see if you wanted to weigh in there, just from how the Basic Needs Center kind of is developing from your team and from the development perspective, and what initiatives you might have going on in that space as well.
Yeah, I will say, I'll let you keep going. I think Monroe and Mick have covered the core components of it, and we're all contributing in different ways. And as Mick shared a little bit too, like, we have a lot of disparate services, and like making those links and connections are critical for our students, and wanting to make it as seamless as possible for our Bruins is our goal. And so I think we're all contributing in different ways, but it's nice to see this hub come together and this center come together.
Absolutely. It's really truly such a labor of love and combined effort of all the departments who are involved. So kudos to you guys. And I think it'll be a pretty incredible transition watching, a year from now, the type of resources you've all been able to create in this moment. And once we're able to reflect, from that perspective as well, to lift it up a bit, I would love to hear a little bit about some initiatives that you are all finding exciting outside of the hub in student affairs, and maybe just to shed some light on, what's the current pulse on campus? What are some issues or topics that are really coming up for students? For those who may not be reading the Daily Bruin every single day, what initiatives should we pay attention to, flag? What issues are really pertinent, and where can we direct our audiences to learn a bit more about the wonderful work that you're all doing? Mick, maybe you can go first.
No, thanks, Sam. A lot going on, both as we reassembled campus and then we really come into this year of engagement and, the differing needs of the populations as we've discussed. And as Monroe said, a diversity of backgrounds, a diversity of thinking, a diversity of life experiences. So, I think we're preparing. I'll just reference one area that we've started to see across campuses in the country, and I'm sure we'll be back on our own campus. But those programs where there's differing opinions, those activities where a group might protest that something else has happened, our commitment to being, not only the #1 public, but a public university who values free expression. And I think we're preparing, both listening to our students and audiences, watching what's going around at some of our peer campuses, even here in the UC system, and knowing that we've got a generation of students that have not seen that in person yet. And so a lot of thoughtful preparation goes into how we create engagement in that. One other one I'll just reference for the greater thing is this concept, and the Vice Chancellor mentioned this as we got through the pandemic and we thought about social justice, we thought about policing, we thought about interactions in communities. The University of California adopted a university community safety plan, and we're working very collectively in how that engages our campus, from event planning to creating relationships with students, to having space to be able to address inequities, to relationships with police and authority. And so we're working through a number of measures and steps, both on the campus itself, how we address safety and relationships, and certainly that level of detail that goes into large-scale events, and as I mentioned, maybe those events that we will deem called major events, where we could anticipate different points of view being addressed.
Thank you, Mick. And Suzanne, I sort of wanted to follow that with, from your perspective of what are some initiatives people aren't kind of reading about. You mentioned RISE before, and that really hits home, and seeing people really engage with that initiative, as well as, diving into these conversations, Mick, that are so pertinent to the broader world. And, this is a campus with absolutely intelligent students who are so curious and want to engage and have those conversations. From the development and health perspective, outside of the mental health space, what's coming up for you, and what are you seeing that's particularly important that you think might be the next area to address in future initiatives?
Yeah, thank you. Well, two that I will, if folks aren't aware and haven't been back to Westwood, a key initiative is just our continued expansion of housing. And so, kind of through COVID, and now this past year too, we opened about 5,000 additional bed spaces, some on the on the hill, right on campus, between Hitch and Saxon, and then some right in the heart of Westwood. In Westwood, being able to have apartment style buildings for our transfer students and our upper division students. And so really building kind of a university program within our housing program in the heart of Westwood. And so we have found a lot of great success, and it ties into what I was sharing earlier, but folks feeling a sense and connectedness and a sense of community. And I think through the pandemic, a lot of what our students spoke about, and our Bruins in general, was just the disconnect. And so finding that sense of community has been important to our students. And so the housing has allowed for that, and also allowed for us to be I believe the first public institution, certainly the first in the UC, to offer 4 years of guaranteed housing for incoming direct entry undergrads, and 2 years for our transfers, which is really critical because of the large amount of our transfers, and they're only being here oftentimes for 2 years, and wanting to maximize that experience, and also having housing that really relates to the type of housing that they're looking for, more apartment style. So that has been an initiative, not just in providing the space, but how we provide the resources and support and connection to the institution. Several years ago, we transformed kind of the staffing model for our graduate and family housing with an infusion of our residential life program. And we really did see, particularly since a lot of the family housing is about 5 miles south of campus, this sense of a greater sense of connectedness to the university and a sense of belonging. And so that has been kind of an effort of not just building more housing, which is helpful, and but really in terms of building community and building a connection to UCLA. The other initiative that I'll talk about that does relate to mental health, but I think is an important one, is that we have been actively working on creating a mobile crisis unit that would provide mental health professionals kind of in a co-responder model with our PD, but having mental health professionals at the forefront of students in distress versus having PD as on the forefront. And we're working collaboratively with our PD colleagues to create this for the best experience of our students that are in crisis. And so we're seeing a lot of institutions move in this direction. There's a lot of cooperation. Students are asking for this. And it does allow for those best trained in mental health to be those that are making decisions about what might need to be the next step for someone that's in a distressed moment of what happens and how their care is given in that moment. So that's a significant initiative that we've been taking with a lot of campus partners, including our UCLA health partners, our UCPD, students, student affairs. And so a really nice collaboration across the board to bring this to fruition. So a couple of initiatives that I think are critical that are happening right now as it relates to students' development and health.
Absolutely. And I think the most beautiful part of this conversation is each of you have really touched on how we are very intentionally creating additional and improving the existing spaces where students can really thrive, because, we're setting them up for success while they are here at UCLA to improve and have access to resources that, it's not a one size fits all, as you've all mentioned. And it's really about understanding that diversity and how to approach every type of student and the place that they're in. And with that, our last question from me before we take some questions from the audience. Monroe, I know student internships has been something that has been a big priority for you. So it would be great if you can share a bit on what's the current status, where are we, what is the job market in your department looking like from an internships perspective, and for those who are about to graduate, actually.
Yeah, so I would say, the job market is challenging, I think, for this generation of students coming out of school. I think that, we see a bit of the up and down flow there, but the one thing that clearly is true, though, is that students who engage in internships while they Our students at UCLA actually do better in terms of getting their first job after graduating. And so we're huge proponents of making sure that students are trying to take advantage as much as possible of these internships. And Sam, the one thing I would say, one of the ways we've tried to do this is a fairly new class that we've established. I think we've had it for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's called the Chancellor's Link class. Link stands for Leadership, Innovation, Networking, and Knowledge. And it really came originally from a need for us to think about how we engage student skill sets in dialoguing across areas of difference, and how those skill sets ultimately build leadership skill sets within the students, right? And these leadership skill sets, whether they're about communication or patience or otherwise engagements with people, also lead them into opportunities for internships. So, this is a class of 2 quarters. We take a cohort of about 25 students. For some years, we take the students to Washington, D.C. as a cohort. Other years, we take them up to Sacramento. And at the conclusion of the spring quarter, we provide a stipend to the entire cohort for them to be able to engage in the type of internships that meets their knowledge and meets their interest. And that way, students, 1, don't have to engage in internships that aren't paid, and 2, don't have to take just any internship just because it is paid. And so, we like to think that this is sort of providing students with some opportunities to be as creative as possible in thinking about where their needs and interests actually lie. But more broadly, to your question, I think our Career Center space has been wonderful for our students to be able to access internship opportunities. And, as we talk to the broader alumni, and I'm sure amongst our alumni, we have some parents and we have some probably students of other degrees. It's just really this need for us to, as a community, always encourage our students to take advantage of just the wonderful resources that we have here on the campus and here within the community. And, part of that is, how can we get students connected with our vast alumni network and thinking about all of these wonderful opportunities, all of these potential mentors that exist that can ultimately help our students reach a pathway that they have of interest for them.
Completely. I mean, I couldn't echo that even more, that process of extending oneself and reaching out to, the 3 of you in this room and the teams and all of the Alumni Association staff behind a lot of our mentoring initiatives was completely life-changing for someone like me, and it can help you really set yourself up and direct yourself for success. But for those students who maybe find it more difficult to extend that way, especially in this time, and a question from the audience is, what are the potential opportunities for engaging and mentoring students, and kind of from the alumni side or from those involved in the community but are not students, how can we step in and really do our part? From my perspective with the Alumni Association as a board member, the team here, and kudos to Julie and the entire Alumni Association staff, there's amazing opportunities through UCLA One and the mentorship programs, and even through initiatives like Link, which you just mentioned, Monroe. But are there any other specific initiatives that you all are in charge of or launching, or any other spaces that you would recommend for those listening to extend themselves and engage and mentor students for that life beyond UCLA?
Yeah, and I can certainly get started, but I know that Mick and Suzanne will have a lot to talk about this as well. What I would say is, I think for alumni who are interested in getting involved, first and foremost, know that we have over 25 or 26 departments where we actually want the involvement of alumni in the community and how we go about providing service to students, right? So literally every single department that we have at UCLA for Student Affairs, we're interested in alumni coming back and alumni providing their time to the extent that they're interested in doing so. The other thing I would say is through the Student Affairs website, there are opportunities for alumni who don't quite know all aspects of what Student Affairs actually is, right? So sometimes you need just a quick refresher, even if you were here recently on campus, of exactly what fits under Student Affairs. And so I would really greatly encourage alums to take a look at what's on our website, see what departments we're providing, see the programs and initiatives that we're undertaking, and then to reach out to the directors of these particular units to say, hey, in what ways might I get involved? Last thing I would say, and similar to UCLA One, so we do have mentorship programs within our Career Center. And I think that that's really a very direct way for alumni, particularly those that have employment opportunities for students or just opportunities for students to learn, to get involved. And so I would also suggest going to the UCLA Career Center website as well. I'm going to bow out and let Mick or Suzanne also continue this as well.
Yeah, I'll just echo in terms of, we've really invested a lot in our Career Center and thinking about how we help our students network, help our students get opportunities that they leave as a Bruin with kind of these well-rounded skill sets. And so, in terms of opportunity, if you want to get involved, opportunities in terms of if you have, the opportunity to provide, whether it be internships, just experiences, positions, really, there's a streamlined process for that. So that would be one. But then we do a whole host of programs from our Career Center boot camp, where we take, 60 plus students on a weekend to really drill home in terms of the networking, the understanding your elevator pitch, what you need to do from early on, even, our first year students, not waiting till the very end in terms of thinking about how they prepare in their own career readiness. So a lot of opportunities there that I would say, and then, there's UCLA continues to be a dynamic, ever-changing, many events happening every single day. And so depending on what your interests are or how you were involved, connecting with us in terms of being involved in programs and events and departments, and seeing what we're doing now and volunteering. We have a lot of folks that volunteer, for instance, for many programs with our Bruin Resource Center. That is a center that, for those that might not be as familiar, that work with a number of different student populations, our former foster youth, our parenting students, our formerly incarcerated students, undocumented students, students in recovery. And so always looking for, ways to connect our alumni with our student populations in terms of their own growth development experiences at UCLA.
And I'll just piggyback on that, Sam, and almost use you as an example. The intersectionality of our students today is remarkable, right? We're not in one box. And Sam, you introduced yourself as an international student, and I got to see you as a student employee and a student organization leader and a scholar. So I think for alum being able to engage with us and be in the spaces where students are at, I'll maybe champion that, starting with those informal relationships that lead to formal relationships. I know as we're back into events and programs, students are yearning to have people attend. They are dying to meet folks. And so I think, for those particularly in the Westwood area, being able to be and attend and introduce and meet, I think starts that relationship to what might become a formal mentoring or creating an opportunity that nobody knew might have been available. And I think those that are away from campus, we're using this medium of this webinar. We're still using virtual connections. Our ability maybe to create networking opportunities or to have a connection when somebody's traveling or studying. I had a student today so excited they'll be in UCDC, and being able to know that you might know somebody there, and not only be in a formal program but be able to network and build expanded relationships.
Exactly. And I appreciate you using that example, because there's something magical about, sitting as a student myself at the Wooden Center shift. Mick, you've walked by on your way out to a meeting, and I've been able to wave at you and get to know you over those many years. And so, on the flip side, for those who are out of school, out of university, out of UCLA, and who remember you or remember different experiences they've had, I think anyone listening today, there's a really profound impact you can have in reaching out to someone like, our beautiful guests on the panel today and saying, I'm interested in supporting more, where can we direct you to? And some of the links that the team has shared in the chat, and investigating where exactly you can plug in, and showing that genuine interest in ways that align with your passions, or where life has taken you beyond your UCLA experience. I know that's something that I've had a passion point in, and whenever I've come to anyone in this room or anyone in the Alumni Association, there's always been a welcoming environment to provide that support, and students on the other side of it who really need the support and encouragement, which I don't think will ever stop. So that growing relationship is definitely important. Maybe some final questions from our side before we close out. What's the best way for our audience listening, and for recent grads, young alumni, those who are maybe detached or looking for different ways to stay involved? I know we just talked a little bit about mentorship specifically, but if we wanted to stay involved and plugged in with student affairs and support the mission of what each of you are doing, outside of the website and following these specific initiatives we've discussed, what's the best way for everyone to stay plugged in? And any final commentary on pulling in that support that we would love to see from our community?
Suzanne, you want to start us?
You bet. So I would say, there's a couple of things. There's a community page where we list a lot of the events that are happening, and I think that's a good source. And I'll ask Joseph if we could. I'll find the link and plug it in there. I think that we as leaders within student affairs always welcome engagement from our alumni. And so if you're interested in getting connected, if you're not already so, you can reach out to us directly, and we will get you to the right place to get you plugged in with how you want to be engaged with the university, particularly with our students and our ways that we engage with our students here. So, and Joseph, miracle worker, look at you. Thank you for finding that. So those would be the two things that I would offer right from the outset. Thank you.
I'll jump in from the world I live in. Alumni can still be active participants. And if you're in the Westwood area, this could be your gym of choice or your place to work out, or as I mentioned before, the ability to attend the myriad events, whether you're a sports fan or a patron of the arts. And, I'll pitch, as we're in spring quarter, some of those rich traditions we have. I know our student leaders are planning an amazing spring sing, and I had the student leaders from Powwow in my office today. And I think those are great ways to be back part of the community, re-engage with today's students. And I really think, as I mentioned before, that support really spreads itself in many fashions.
So I will pull up the rear on this one and just say, I think that I'm sort of more than just a person who works in student affairs, and for UCLA, I'm an alum as well. I've been around the campus for many, many years. I don't want to say exactly how many, although looking at all the gray in my beard, I'm sure you can figure it out a little bit here. But I do think that what alumni need to know is that our students are very interested in seeing them, and they're very interested in hearing from them. And we've talked a little bit about different ways for alumni to get plugged in and get connected, but I think sometimes, even before I came back here to work at UCLA, I often thought to myself, has my time sort of passed? Should I just stay away? Should I actually come back? Should I, try to insert myself? I was on the campus before. Now you have a new generation. I think our alumni always bring a very, very rich perspective, the same kinds of rich perspectives that they had when they were students have just been honed even greater as alums. And so, the first and foremost thing I would say is that our students want to hear from our alums and want to see them. The next thing I want to say with this opportunity is that, I feel really blessed to do this work, to work with our students, to work with our broader community. But I'll also say that the success of our organization is not by accident. And I want to give a lot of credit to AVC DeLuca and to AVC Steplow, because these are two individuals who are entirely dedicated to the overall student experience and to working with our campus community in ways that brings about success for UCLA. And, I would also say to alums, as hopefully they experienced when they were students, we have an organization of people who are dedicated to helping our students and to helping our community. And, we would love for our alums to join us in this journey, right? Join us in making sure that UCLA continues to be the premier institution, I honestly, I think in the world, but certainly our destination is in the country. So, Sam, that's what I would say, and just really appreciative of the time to be able to speak to you and speak to our alums about this.
You couldn't have wrapped it up in a more perfect way. And again, being an international student who came to UCLA, it is completely the best institution in the world. We can say that with complete bias, but it is true. And, from my perspective, the only thing I'd say in addition to that is, even if you don't, there's a lot of resources Joseph has shared in the chat and that our panelists have shared with you today as how you could get involved and learn a bit more about these initiatives. But if you're trying to figure out how to basically, at the basic level, integrate yourself back into the community, come to an event, come to Spring Sing, show up at the Wooden Center, connect with the team who are working on the RISE program, go to the Student Affairs office, make yourself visible. As Monroe said, that's the first step, and there is a space for every single perspective from every single alumni that's walked through our doors and had an experience thereafter. So with that, I would love to extend my personal thanks to all three of you. As I mentioned, the work you do completely supported and uplifted my endeavors as an individual, and I know continues to do so for everybody who's walking on campus, from staff to students to alumni today. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone else does too. And with that, I'll bring back Joseph to wrap us up for the evening.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Monroe, Mick, and Suzanne for being here. We couldn't appreciate it enough. I just want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. I hope you have a good rest of your night and a wonderful rest of your week. And as we like to end these, go Bruins.